the other one?
It's probably on.
Yeah, but you're on your own. What do you mean? Was it the one you gave me? Different one?
Probably hot mic stuff.
Where'd it go?
Where was
There it is. The little square lab. I have that thing. There we go.
Lose my stuff already?
We're always in dry here.
Okay.
We, for the first time, had good audio this week. First time.
Audio's no joke. It's hard to do.
Huh?
Okay, just because you said so. That was close. Tiana, can you look at video real quick and see how that looks recentered?
Alright. Is it big enough for you?
Bigger than I am.
You wanna? John, we good? How's it look with the video? Okay?
Second mic is off.
Alright. How long do you cut?
He's holding down 25 seconds, and then the blue light will come on. You want to? There you go.
And it's on.
All right.
And how's this one sound?
Yeah, but that's really close. Pull this back.
Okay. What are we gonna do? Alright. How's the sound over there?
How about now?
A little
You got
bit
me too?
louder. You're gonna have to be a little bit louder. This is good.
Okay.
Yeah?
I think so.
For Tool, how does it sound for us? Good?
Sounds
you
great.
Turn up the main actually quite a bit more. Keep going, keep going, keep going.
A little more kick
right
drum?
there. That sounds good, right? Yeah. It's a bigger nod.
Do a countdown.
Countdown to what?
5 to 1.
All you, Chris.
Action.
Are we streaming? That's the next question. All right. All right, let's get started then. Welcome to Hacker Dojo. We're here to launch Chris Matthews' new book, Start Telling People. He's going to give a little intro about that, but overall, I'm Emily. I am the board chair of Hacker Dojo. I'm here to help and support anyone and any entrepreneur and their journeys, and we're here to support Chris in this. Chris, would you tell everyone a little about yourself?
Sure, thanks. Lovely to be here. I've been working in startups for over a decade now, almost all of it here in the Bay Area, with the exception of 2 years in the Netherlands. And through it all, from everything from hardware and software and consumer and B2B, I've seen a bunch of patterns in how early stage startups can approach marketing and make that transition, in some cases out of stealth, and other cases in those first couple years after they're out of stealth, and how those situations are pretty different than like standard marketing 101 textbooks. And there was a whole bunch of books on marketing, and there's a whole bunch of books on startups, but there wasn't one that really captured this bit. And so what you see in the book is functionally what I'd kind of wished I could have had access to when I started working with the first startup I got involved with back in like 2012. And that collection of ideas came together in a chapter outline back in September. And that day, I guess I decided I was going to write a book, and 6 months later I was holding one. So here we are. But the intent is it was written to help early stage startups navigate out into the world. I've worked with a lot of engineers across a lot of different spaces, and it's really fun when you get to see the intersection of marketing and engineering come together as real collaborators.
Thank you. You kind of answered my first two questions anyways. So can you give a brief overview of these key principles that you've outlined in your book?
Sure. The main principle of the book, the thread that holds it all together, is that marketing is a discipline. It's not an activity. Like there are activities involved, but if you go away from today thinking like with one new piece of information, it's if I can convince you to start thinking about marketing as a wider discipline that touches every single part of the company you're trying to build or building or have built, that will be a step forward. Because one of the common mistakes, one of the easy ones to avoid, is to think about marketing as, let's just go play some ads, right? And that's not it. That's such a thin version of it.
Well, Hacker Dojo needs to read this book, all of us as staff. I read most of it, got to the last 2 chapters. I couldn't catch up, but you had very good summaries in them, and definitely going to be taking some key things out of it for ourselves. So
Great.
Thank you. Next question is, what opportunities, those unique challenges, is it about startups that you're addressing? Like, what specifically?
So when startups get going, there's this weird tension between we want to be fast and nimble and we want to make a really big promise of what we're going to do. And those things are in absolute conflict because one of them's a long-term commitment and one of them's like, I'm not quite sure how today's going to end up. And one of the fundamentals with marketing is being able to describe who are you, what are you doing, who's it for? And your ability to define that and agree on it is super important because that's kind of the thing that defines who you get to hire, right? It's okay if that story changes, but the discipline of going through and understanding, you have to agree on what it is right now, and we might change it, but that's okay, versus having like 3 founders that all think you're working on a vaguely different thing.
Yes, I've been in a few startups. That is definitely the last one for me. Very similar case. How about any case studies you've actually gone through? Can you give one of those real life stories of yours?
So there's 2, and one of them actually relates back to Hacker Dojo if you go back far enough. But the most recent one, I was brought into Mayfield Robotics to be their first marketing hire. Started out as a consultant, and then they brought me in full time. This was a stealthy startup that had not launched, owned by Bosch. So it's part of Bosch's internal incubator. And they brought me in August and said, we want to launch this robot at CES in January. And you kind of do the math, you're like, you what? And so we had to very quickly figure out how we were going to make that transition happen from absolute secret, no one knew anything, to winning Best in Show awards from like Engadget, Wired, CES, CS Magazine, PC Magazine. And the reason we did it is the founders, to their credit, were willing to say, okay, how do we put marketing across the whole organization? How do we make sure everyone understands that this is now what we are all working on? And that went down to everything from, I grabbed all the prototypes that were all like on racks, dusty and broken, and took them all to a photo studio and got glittery photos of all these old prototypes, like 40 or 50 of them. And we built a book, like a hardcover coffee table book, that when we were showing the robot for the first time to journalists, they got to see how we got there, right? It built trust in that progress. So that's one area where if they had simply waited and said, we'll start marketing the day we want to tell people about it, all of the back work wouldn't have been done. Like, this is about scaffolding that you can start building now that future you is going to really appreciate. And there's a few things in the book about like how to think about that specifically across different industries, but start early, probably earlier than you think, and it will pay back on itself many times over.
I like the prototype thing. It's like sketches from Picasso. Those are actually just worth as much as some of the famous paintings themselves. So this innovation you had, you played in the strategy prototyping of these items. What more innovation would you say coincides with the startups that's different? And
so startups get to do different things than big companies, right? This is really important. You get to operate at a different level, and everyone can be involved in this. So don't miss those opportunities to put that to use. Like two really good examples. Customer service. Really good customer service is a brand asset, and you have the ability to make that start from the first time you reach out to a customer. So instead of trying to unravel a really hefty customer service organization, instead, it's closer to how do we make sure everyone we talk to from number one thinks we're absolutely amazing at what we do, and we're working for them. So you can do that from the beginning instead of bigger companies that have very recently had to figure out, oh, how do we do this, right? Like, it wasn't that long ago that Twitter kind of replaced, or Threads, hopefully, replaced like 800 numbers, right? And then all of a sudden, all your dirty laundry is out for everyone to see. So you had to be on top of it. And the other one is HR. You have the option of making your place a fantastic place to work, and your brand can help build that excitement and that enthusiasm inside the company you're building from the beginning. But that also means that everyone has to love what you're working on. And so some of this actually falls into the marketing camp, because marketing's the one that's going to run your launches. And if you get to include everyone and participate in that, you can completely change the dynamic of a small team.
Yeah, that they actually have a piece of it, and they become your marketing material as well.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds good. Now, startups, of course, have this tendency to need to pivot. You've been marketing this one way early, often, and then suddenly you're completely pivoting to another market or even a different product in essence of it. How are you addressing this?
Well, you're gonna have to change some things along the way. Like you started with some sort of idea of why you're there and what you're gonna do. And if you're changing because you found a better way to do that, then great. Like that is the success part of iteration and early stage companies. And hang on to just the idea of like, well, if you found something that was right, then celebrate that and put that into how you communicate about what it is you're doing and who it's for, and the position you want to end up holding in the market when you get there.
So a company's already been doing this brand, and everyone knows the brand is doing X.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of now Y. Like, how do you get the public to understand that transition? Like, is there a certain marketing strategy you're going in, like, hey, we used to be this, now we're doing that?
So that can be accomplished in a few different ways. It kind of depends on how big you are at that point, because if if you're changing from, well, like the Airbnb example, right? Like they got real skinny at one point before they got picked up by YC, and the founders were making like joke cereal boxes that they were selling out of their apartment to try and make rent. Like they were down to like, we're just doing anything to make money. That's not what this is. This is closer to like, if you've decided who you're working for and who you're creating something for, and you find a better way to do it, then this is something you can turn into an asset. You can show them where you were and why this is better, and they should nod their heads and be like, yeah, you're right, that's better. It's not because they asked for it, but because you're there doing the innovating.
Okay. I was getting into your demos section.
Right.
Sounds like that was a pivotal point for your book, is more about the demos. And I definitely have lived that life of on edge of my seat for every demo.
For those of you here in the room, who's done a demo before? Okay. Who's done a demo that's gone badly? Okay. Who's never had a problem with a demo ever?
No.
Okay.
I don't believe you.
Good. So demos are a skill, right? And this is something where it's a perfect example of how engineering and marketing can work together. Engineering's got to build the thing, and then you have to go into the theatrics and the magic of showing off how it works and what it does. And there's a very special definition in there I want to be clear on. When someone asks you, what does it do? Most engineers hear that and they think, they would like to know how it works. And marketing people convert that into, no, they would like to know what it does for them. They actually do not really care about how it works. And that simple translation is a great example of how engineers and marketers can speak English to each other in the same room and have completely different conversations, unless you know each other well enough to pick that up. So one of the chapters in the book is a very methodical approach to how to run a bulletproof demo. And this gets to all of the prep that you need to do, all the contingencies that you need to put in place, and all of the scripting that you need to make it functionally a show. And getting people out of the mindset of like, you just show the people the product, right? Like, isn't that it? And then your Wi-Fi dies, or your Bluetooth fails, or your battery isn't charged. Those three, by the way, those are the three. Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, battery. You cannot check those enough. And ask me how I know.
I can say I know.
Yeah, and so to be able to run a really compelling demo is a learnable skill, but it's not innate in the person who made the product. And so I spent a lot of time, and I've gotten a lot of interest, even in the handful of weeks this book's been out, from organizations that are like, oh, we'd like to be better at that. We didn't know there was a way to do better.
Yeah, so my experience with demos have been all the way up to that last minute. Let me get that in so the customer can see it. I'm in the room in front of the customer, and they're launching, pressing the button, and then the whole thing dies.
Yeah, we at Mayfield we had a rule: no engineering in public, and that one stuck with me. It's like, it's not a tattoo, but it's almost a tattoo.
Yeah, it's something we also should learn for our own lightning talks. Sometimes we're demoing our own thing up here, and it dies. Computer or the coding doesn't compile. It's something.
And here is a safe space, right? Like
Yeah.
this is okay. Like there is a tolerance for risk here that is accepted because you all understand each other.
That's true.
But when you're doing a demo for a reason typically, it's probably one of four things when you hit the real world. It's probably for investment, it's probably to close a key hire, close a sale, or get media coverage. Yeah. You don't want to miss any one of those four. Like, they're all worth really sweating the details on.
Thanks. The next part is there any industry or sector that you're actually more targeting for the world on this book?
This book definitely resonates more with not so much industries, but companies working on stuff that is brand new, like has never been seen before. The newer it is, the harder it is to put out into the world, but also the more opportunities you have to craft the space that you want to land into. And so this, like someone doing commodity work, like we're gonna make a new blue phone case, like, okay, there's maybe less here for that. But when you're actually doing something brand new, that's where this gets really interesting.
Okay, thanks. That's pretty much our entire memberships here and anyone else that walks in our door for the most part. Next question is about market analysis. We're entrepreneurs, we're engineers.
Yep.
We've never really done a lot of that market analysis. What is your advice, or how does your book talk to us about this?
Data's a bit of a bear sometimes, right? Because like data doesn't care. It's just data. And the data is never the answer. The answer is sometimes in the data. The catch is that a lot of startups don't tend to have a lot of data, but you can go forage for it. And there's an incredible number of tools out there now that make going to get data cheaper and faster than it's ever been. Has anyone here ever gone to Google and typed in dataset : Like, it's amazing the number of open data sets that are out there that you can just go get and put into Google BigQuery and start turning them around and compare them to other data sets, look at what you've got, but like, do not assume that there's nothing out there, because you don't have any. You can go get it. And so I actually got to interview a really close friend of mine for the book, for the chapter about data. He developed a whole black box approach to programmatic ads for a big agency up in the city. And like, he's great at this stuff, but this is a good example of being able to use the fact that you're a startup and understand the data probably hasn't been collected for you perfectly, but you can go get it. And even things like surveys. You can do a national survey with SurveyMonkey or any other tool for like 1,000 people for a couple $1,000, and you'll have the results tomorrow. So it's like, sometimes you just have to go get it. But don't forget that survey results then can be like flipped on their heads and put into Tableau and looked at in a bunch of different ways, because the insights can come out of it sometimes by like, what my friend Gary said, look for gaps and collisions in your data. Like, any moment where you see a gap or you see things that don't actually jive with each other, something's there. And it's like, dig into that and figure it out.
Okay, that makes sense. Generally, that's where the nuance in everybody's product can fit in.
Yep.
Generally in there. So how does this, we're doing market analysis, we're moving on to the demos, but now the company wants to scale.
Mm-hmm.
How are you addressing scalability of going from this tiny entrepreneur to hopefully the big boys club up there?
There's a lot of people that have strong opinions about how to scale a business, but specific to the marketing element, it's important to realize that the team you will need for the first couple years is not the same as the team you need 5 years from now. Now, that team could turn into that team, but making sure that you resource your marketing efforts appropriately for where you're at means finding this balance, because like, one easy mistake to make is, I'll just hire a junior marketing person and I'll bring him in and we'll do like the basics and easy stuff. Well, that's, if it was just basics and easy stuff, you actually would have already done it if it was important. So now you're bringing in someone to do something you've already said wasn't important. And maybe worse, that person's gonna need a manager. Well, guess what? You've just decided who the head of marketing is. And you said you weren't gonna do that. So push that one up a bit and say, we need someone who can be at that like strategic level and sit at the table with us as we make big choices, because marketing is going to touch every part of the business. It's going to be involved in things like who your suppliers are or where your next factory is.
In my past, I've hired directly from bigger companies that have experience, but when they got into the startup, they couldn't really wrap their heads around that transition. What kind of characteristics are you looking for in a person that you want to be up there eventually, but right now experienced, but flexible?
Someone who's got really good grasp of the most current tools that are out there and can use them, right? Like, it might be someone who has a really good grasp of the Adobe suite, or someone who really knows Canva, or someone who really knows WordPress. Like, they may have some deep knowledge on one of the categories of how to make stuff, right? Your content, your storytelling, or maybe it's PR and they're really well connected in that way. But someone who can do some of the work themselves, because that part of the work can then inform a bunch of other people that they can deputize. And that can be like people off Fiverr or Upwork. It can be someone from operations that's got a few hours to spare. But you need to have someone with an ability to get their hands dirty on the work and able to sit with you as the founder at a table and understand where you're going and really get the big picture of this. So you're looking for those two things, and they're out there.
The piece about latest technology, that's a tidbit I will definitely take home. I've had in my past hired marketing, and I've been at a startup that we had no marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And actually they were about the same kind of product. When I was in the startup with the marketing early on, it was really hard for the leadership teams to jive together. How are those dynamics handled, and how do you discuss those in your book?
Well, if you've got a marketing team and it's not jiving with the rest of the company, you got to ask yourself the hard question of why, right? Were they brought in with an expectation that didn't meet reality? Or did marketing get brought in to do something that is like more of a myopic idea of what marketing is, and you've got maybe a marketing person who's like trying to push you in the right direction, and you're not hearing what they're saying. So like, that specific is hard to pull into, but
Yeah, it's that dynamic of what's more important, the engineering work that I'm doing right now, getting the software out, or writing that article over for the marketing team.
yes.
That's where it was always
Yeah.
the tension.
And there's always going to be tension in prioritization, always. But it doesn't mean that engineering's always going to beat marketing. It doesn't mean marketing's always going to beat engineering. You have to. This is part of why, if you bring marketing in as a discipline and not an activity, someone from marketing or someone thinking about marketing was at the table when you were setting priorities. And if they're not there at the beginning, it's really hard to inject new priorities midstream, which may be what you ran into.
Definitely. It was a different experience from having one with a marketing team and one with none.
Mm-hmm.
And that was more of an organic, bootstrapped company that
Yep.
slowly took their time to get succeeded, but it took some time. What do you have for advice for aspiring entrepreneurs in this world of just looking out and developing their own marketing strategy? A lot of us don't have $2,000 in the bank to do a market analysis or even talk to someone for $400 an hour. So
One of the good places to start, especially if you're by yourself, or if you've got like just two people or like really small, is can you write down your vision and your mission and your core product identity? So like, here's what the world's gonna look like when we're successful. That'd be the vision. The mission is like the pieces we're gonna put together to get to that happening. And then the core product is like, what do we say we make? And those can be a sentence each. They don't have to be like flowery and poetic, but you should agree on what those are. You should be able to write them down. And you can change them later, but getting core alignment on those things help you make so many other choices in the future. Because the next one you've got to make is what position in the market do you want to hold?
and how do they, I mean, now we have it internally. The two of these founders decided all that. How do they get their word out? What simple ways do you recommend them to start their own branding, getting their name out there?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you want to get your name out there, like do something to the public.
The start telling people part.
Right, let's start telling people apart. Okay. So that means the most fundamental thing is consistency. And so let's decide early on things like, even some basics, like what color, what font, what's our logo? Like, because you've probably had 3 logos by now and they all might be very similar, but like pick the one, delete the others, put them in a folder where you can't accidentally make a mistake. Be super consistent about how you talk about what your company's doing and where you're going, because if you talk to a TechCrunch reporter about it and your co-founder goes and talks to a Verge reporter about it and they say different things, well, you're in a bad spot at that point. You're going to have to unravel some of that. And so anything that you want to put out in the public, make sure that your team, even if it's a small team, agrees that, yes, that's the right way to do that, and that you would all do it the same way, versus like having your kind of personal spin on stuff, because that consistency is what will build trust. And what you need early is trust.
Okay, thank you. Consistency in messaging. It's another thing we are also working on in Hacker Dojos. We're trying to build some grants, and we need to have that consistent message, so everyone, we don't have to write them too often. I saw some things in the book about ask 30% feedback, and can you explain that a little bit more for me? It's about the ecosystem.
That was one I picked up early that works on marketing and engineering side. Is if you get in the habit of building a culture where you can ask for 30% feedback, like I am going to show you something that is 30% done. Well, all right, I can understand, like that's a long way from done. So my expectations just drop down here, and we're having a conversation about what it's going to become instead of what it is. That's so different than like, hey, what do you think of this thing I just made? And having someone sort of look at it and try and interpret if it's good. And when it comes to creative work, especially in the marketing side, so you're talking about a new website or your first ad campaign or even your first t-shirt, like if you can get it, the conversation started at that much earlier level, then you're going to be much more collaborative and easy to work with, and that works between engineering and marketing really well. It also helps marketing people understand what you're doing. And the better we can understand what the engineers are working on, the better story we can tell about what you're building. And the bit more we can make you guys look like heroes. Because like, we want to get the story right too.
Okay. More along the lines of don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Just get it out there. It doesn't need to be finished.
And as long as you understand, you both, like everyone in the room agrees that this isn't finished and we're looking at a work in progress, the conversation shifts immediately.
Okay. That's a favorite phrase of mine.
Yep. That's a good one.
I used to hold on to things until never was perfect. So until I had the last minute, I had to give it in or turn it in. Anything else you'd like to share about this book?
It was written mostly for engineers, even though it's about marketing. Like, this is ideally a book that gets in the hands of a founder or co-founder to give you ways to talk about the side of the fence that you've maybe never thought about and understand who you might be looking for when you start having those conversations and how to understand and really vet what someone is telling you and if they're the right fit for you. And it does work for marketing people too, because there's a lot of really talented marketing people out there who do not get the engineering side of the house. And so if this can help them understand some of the things I learned the hard way of how to work with really talented groups of engineers and get their stories out and their products out, then that's going to help them too. So it does play both roles, but I did lean much more heavily on the founder engineering side of this for making the book approachable to people like you. And so I'm incredibly curious to know, for anyone in this room that reads any of it, I'm very curious to hear what you think. And I worked pretty hard to write it as a very sort of conversational tone. Like, it doesn't read like a textbook. It reads closer to stories. And you don't have to read it in order. You can read chapters out of order. But different parts of this will resonate differently with you based on what kind of product you're working on and where you're at in the stage. But if you're in that early stage, you're facing marketing situations that a lot of standard marketing advice won't work for. And so hopefully this gives you some foils and viewpoints to look at that stuff with.
Thank you. Just about your book in general, the feedback you've gotten so far, anything unique about it or want to share that people have said about your book?
Well, so far, I feel really lucky. Like, all the Amazon reviews are 5 stars. There are 9. So that's like, it's not none. Like, I'm not watching it like every day, but like.
Are they family and friends?
There are a couple of people on there I know, and some that I don't. So it's a mix. But actually, Amazon won't let your family leave a review for your book. That's like,
Good to know.
don't do that. Yeah. And then some of the anecdotal stuff from engineers I've worked with who have read it and are giving me feedback that, yes, this gives me better ways to think about like how marketing and brand impact other parts of the business that they'd never thought about, like customer service or like culture, and how impactful that can be. So it has been validating that a lot of this, from an engineer standpoint, is like, this makes sense.
Okay. Well, thank you. I have just one more question. How can we help you? This audience, our organization?
Treat marketing like a discipline when you start. Like, I want to go back to like one little metaphor there to help make that clear. It's kind of like skiing. You can go skiing for the day and have fun, but if you want to be a pro skier, you probably started when you're 3, and skiing is just every part of your life. It's your nutrition, it's your weekends, it's your understanding altitude, and you're understanding different equipment nuances and competitors, and everything about your life is related to that even when you're not doing it. So if you understand marketing as a discipline and bring it in early that way, it will change the way you make some early choices that will make your future lives hopefully a lot better. So that'd be the one. And then the other is, if and when you read the book, please let me know what you think. I'm very open to feedback. I love talking about it, and I'd love the feedback, because you're exactly who I wrote it for.
Thank you. Other than Amazon and now at Hacker Dojo, where can you buy the book? Those are the 2 locations?
So yeah, Amazon has the book and the Kindle. By the end of the summer, I'll have an audiobook. So I'm going to the studio to record that. Okay. So just booked those dates this morning. And you can grab one. If you grab one here tonight, it's $20, which is the same as on Amazon, but I'll kick back $5 of that back to the dojo. And then it is available to bookstores and libraries if they want to order it, but they have to proactively order it.
All right, thank you. And thank you for the kickback to us on that. Definitely appreciated. Now we're opening up to the floor. Any questions out there? Ken, you want to come up? I'll have John walk around the room.
And thanks for having me here to do this. This is super fun. I enjoy this.
Yeah, the 30% thing was really very interesting. So you could just have like a prototype. I'll send an email confirmation or text, just kind of proof of concept, not even that. But that's the kind of stuff you mean for the 30%.
Well, yeah, if you're seeing a prototype, or you're seeing wireframes of a website, or you're seeing a Figma sketch of a app design, like, understand that you're not looking at the final product. That's not the right color. It's not the right font. Stop talking about that.
Yeah, you don't have to make it fit on all these sizes of browsers and stuff. Just whatever you have, that kind of stuff. That'd be nice.
Who's next? Oh, good. A couple. He was just there.
You were talking about when to hire the marketing person for your startup, but I wasn't really clear on at what point you think that happens. Are you still doing, you mentioned that it sounded like for some of these startups they already had a product and it was just going to be a few months before it was unveiled. Is that the right time, or should you be doing as part of your beginning team?
It depends, but what the one counsel I would offer that you shouldn't do is wait until you're ready and then hire marketing or start marketing. So like, there is some early foundational work that has to get done. If you happen to know the day that you would like, say in an ideal world, the day you are launching a product or the day that you want to tell the world about it, somewhere in the 6 to 12 months before that is a good rough timeline of how long would it take to set up long form interview with a couple really good reporters and give them access early so that they can have a great story when you launch. How long would it take to book, the space at CES that you're going to need, not just the display area, but like your hotel rooms and your restaurants and everything else. Like, think about some of that work happening months before, and give yourself the leeway of getting that done so that you're not panicked at it. It doesn't mean that you necessarily hire that person at that time. Like, you might be doing this with a consultant and half time of one of your founders if they're a really good storyteller. Like, if you or one of your founders is the stronger storyteller, that's your start for marketing. But part of this with like, when and how do we start marketing is like, it's not really a when question. You started the moment you started the company, and it's all about how. So at least months before, and then it's going to be situationally dependent on whether or not that's someone you have to bring in, or an agency, or a freelancer that you can pull in as a consultant first and then maybe move to full time. There's a lot of dynamics there. One there and then here.
Hi, one kind of divide between engineering and marketing is on costs. Marketing often has no cost to kind of figure out where to position a product, or they have to get it down to position a product where they think they'll sell. Engineering has often other ideas of costs and don't necessarily want to be pinned down. Have you encountered those situations, and how did you, I guess, get them to work out?
So let me make sure I understand that. So, like, how does marketing budget compared to engineering? Is that?
Let's see, your engineering might say, it's going to cost what it's going to cost. The customer's got to pay it. Marketing says, well, I got to have a certain price point to sell.
I see. So more like, how do you do pricing and market strategy?
And getting both sides. And getting both sides on board.
Yep.
In a harmonious sort of a way.
The sooner you both understand the world, the better, more likely you are to be aligned, right? Like, if engineering just tosses the product over the fence when it's done and says, hey, it's $1,000, and marketing comes back and says, well, we've never seen this before, and everyone else in the market is 300, we have a problem. That's a rough time to figure that out. But if marketing was at the table early, I guess this kind of goes back to, like, if marketing was a discipline from the beginning, you had that conversation before engineering had prototype, or you had like done any sort of work towards something that wasn't going to be market sustainable. So I would hope you just avoid that situation. In the advent that you don't, you do run some pretty big risks of taking a product to market that doesn't have product market fit. And pricing is one that can get you, like, real quick. So I think your question invokes more of an inspiration that, like, you really shouldn't surprise anyone in your executive team with something that is a complete non-starter in the gears of your operation. And pricing is certainly one, but hopefully you've thought about that early enough that you know what your target is, and there's a reason that you set that target.
Yeah, so I'm starting a company. It's a hybrid software and to physical product company, and I've had a pretty broad and deep career, but I'm always fearful of what I don't know, and so I tend to bring folks in early. But at the same time, it's really hard to allocate activity, especially with as you bring someone in who's ostensibly an expert but is not expert in what you're doing, and how they choose to allocate or grab budget. And so do you have any guidance around that, or is that still like a touch and feel type of process and using prior experience as a crutch for judgment?
Well, the nice part about this is that the definition of marketing doesn't really change. It's the right message to the right person at the right time. That's really it. And so to the extent that your product or your market requires certain costs or certain expenses, like whether it's not just how you advertise, right? It could be your partnerships. It could be things like retail strategy in some cases. It could be things like your PR strategy. All of that should be in the service of right message to the right person at the right time. If you and your marketing, whoever is thinking about marketing choices, keeps coming back to that as a touchstone, you should agree on what you're trying to accomplish. And then you can have a discussion about whether or not the tactics are the best ones for right now, or whether you need to no, we want to do that, but we can't afford it right now. Like, we must find something cheaper right now, but we will do that in 6 months or a year. That's a totally viable response. And it pushes you back to, okay, well, how do we get the right message to the right person at the right time now? And maybe that means you scale back the number of people you want to reach. Or maybe it means you scale back the number of markets you're going to be in at launch. But don't compromise on the thing you're trying to achieve.
Thank you for doing the speech. I really appreciate it. It's been pretty insightful. And my question for you today is going to be, so I hear a lot of startups talking about having the ability to hire somebody to do some kind of work for them, engineers particularly. So how do you work with, on a product that has a little bit of validation, but you need kind of like a better product because of safety issues? I'm working on a kids' educational platform. For that nature, you have to regulate the platform to COPPA, Child Online Privacy Protection Act. So I need a lot of features that in the platform that won't get me sued, because getting sued is like, that's that. So I'm trying to avoid it. But I need engineers who are willing to work on the platform and kind of like play with that. How do you deal with bringing in early engineers and splitting equity? Because oftentimes I hear also another fear that I have is that people come into the company, they work for a little bit, and then you give them all this equity, and they just kind of run away with it. And then I hear companies talk about the ability to bring in somebody, work for free, and then kind of create a relationship and eventually bring them in. So how do you handle that conversation, and how do you manage the equity part, and how do you manage like that aspect?
Well, I'll start by saying I'm not an equity expert. But equity, the whole point of equity is to give someone a long-term stake in the success of the company. So that should be the reason that's offered, not as like some sort of proxy for short-term work that you could just hire out. Yeah. And when it comes to like bringing in the right people, whether they're engineers or marketing people or product people, if you're working on the product, like whoever's in charge of product really has three things they got to keep their eyes on. One is regulation, like let's not get sued, because spending your money on lawyers is a terrible idea, because it doesn't move anything forward except the lawyers. And then the other two are, you got to meet the needs of a customer and you got to make some money. And like that's what a product officer does, is those three. So marketing loves working alongside really opinionated product people, because those product people's point of view is the story you get to go to the market with. They're the connection between you and the outside world. And then the customer service side of this is like the feedback loop that comes back. But whether it's engineering or product or marketing, those early people you bring in, if you're bringing them in for equity, it should be because they want to be there for a long time. And if they're bringing them in to do a task, you need to pay them in cash.
So how would you go about, if you have like much cash to kind of spare around, like you spare around, how would you deal with paying those engineers? And would you suggest outsourcing? Because I've done some outsourcing through Fire, but they really don't.
Yeah, we should talk offline on that one. Like that one gets
Okay.
into a little specifics on like, I'm not going to tell you how to do your engineering. I'm not the right person to ask.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for the fireside chat. I totally acknowledge the importance of marketing. So my question is, if we break down marketing, there is PR, corporate marketing, product marketing, social marketing, event marketing. So it seems a lot of discussion today is around the product marketing. So how do you suggest balancing all these marketing activities?
One of the nice things about early stage startups is you don't have an obligation to operate at massive scale right away. Like you can be very, very focused on who you're going after. You go back to that right message, right person, right time idea. If you're asking, like if you're saying who your customer is and you can do like good demographics, that's a good start. But then, okay, of those people, who do we want as our first 100 or even our first 10? Because like your first 10 will help define your first 100, and your first 100 is probably going to help define your first 1,000. And so as you think about all these different avenues of what is considered marketing, right? How you get messaging out into the world, whether it's PR, whether it's getting your product story right and your packaging done well and your product marketing, or whether it's more things like event marketing, that's all going to change so rapidly and so frequently for you that trying to handle those as specifics means you're going to end up with a bunch of people sitting around waiting for their turn. And so your early marketing efforts, this kind of goes back to that point of like the team you'll need in 5 years is not the team you need now. That team you need now might turn into that, but don't try and do your 5-year thing and expect that it's going to be exactly perfect for right now. So be nimble and scrappy. I mean, it's a lot of the same engineering principles that you all live day to day, right? Like, you're going to have to wear a bunch of hats. It's going to shift around a lot. But if you stay true to, like, what's the vision and mission and the big idea, and are we trying to tell the right thing to the right people at the right time? Like, those things can really solidify how you make choices about how you prioritize the different categories of marketing that can happen.
Thank you.
Sorry, we're limited to 2 mics right now. We'll grow eventually. Well, thank you, Chris. This has been great.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Definitely something we love to prop up are books like this, and it helps not just you, but our own members, our organization, and our community in general. So
Great.
Thank you. Really appreciate today.
And thanks for the work you do here. Like, this is places like this create really fun companies.
Yes. Yes, they do. All right, thank you. For those of you, there's the QR code to learn more about the book. And of course, the book is in the back if you'd like to buy it and also get it signed today.